We're here with Kevin Hollinrake, who is the Conservative Party candidate for the general election here in Thirsk and Malton. Good evening, Kevin.
Good evening, David. Delighted to be here.
And Kevin, I've got a few questions for you about environment and climate. And can I start with this one? If you are elected, what would be your top priorities to protect and restore the natural environment here in Thirsk and Malton?
I'd say it's a continuation of my previous priorities. Three big things. Decarbonisation, obviously, the climate change emergency that we have in this country, so making sure we get to net zero as quickly as possible, but on as smooth as glide path as possible to make sure that we take businesses and people with it. We need to make sure we improve biodiversity, of course. It's not just about decarbonisation. Make sure there's more habitat for insects or animals or whatever else we need to improve upon. And the last one, which is a very controversial one, of course, is water quality. So we want to make sure that we hold the big companies to account in terms of the utilities to clean up our water. A statistic for you, actually, because it's not often used. We monitor many more of our storm overflows these days, 100% of them actually, compared to 7% back in 2010. But also our bathing waters are better quality now than they were in 2010, 90% rated good or better, versus 76% I think back in 2010. So there have been improvements, but not enough improvements in all those areas. We need to double down on it and make sure we get to where we need to get to on all those three different priority areas.
Great, thank you. In fact, that was going to be my second question about rivers, so let's skip on from that one. What about agriculture? What more should we be doing to help farmers transition to more sustainable methods of agriculture?
Well, we've done a lot of work on this. I was actually Michael Gove's parliamentary private secretary, his bag carrier, if you like, as a member of parliament for 5 years when he was DEFRA secretary. And his plan, as we've now put in place, is to move from simply acreage-based payments for direct payments that support farming to payments that support and incentivise things like biodiversity and more sustainable practices, improving the soil quality, for example, improving the amount of organic matter in our soil quality, improving water quality, making sure we have more habitats for our birds, our insects, our small animals, all these different things we need to do. And that's how we've moved the whole system to that different basis. The environmental land management schemes, which incentivise our farmers now to sign up to those things, and 50% of farmers have. So we know that's working. It should be a step change in terms of biodiversity.
Great, thank you. How about taking the public with you on climate and nature policy? That's crucial. And how would you achieve it, though? Is it about what you think people will accept, or is it what the science says is necessary?
Well, I think it's a combination of two things. It's leadership, so we have to be very clear about the urgency and the priority. And I think the world first commitment to legislate for net zero, as we did, the UK did, was very important in setting that signal. We're going to get to a net zero by 2050, and that's net zero compared to where we were in 1990. That's how that calculation works. So leadership's important, and making sure that people understand the need for that. So, and talking about not just, as I said before, not just about decarbonisation, but biodiversity and other environmental priorities. But we've got to do it in a way that doesn't put too much impact on people's households, on people's incomes, on people's living standards, of course, and their costs. So it's making sure we have a strategic approach to that. We have some key markers. We've already decarbonised faster than any other G7 country. 50% reduction compared to 1990 levels. Target is 68% by 2030. That has not changed. That target is still there. 2050 is where we need to get to net zero. So that's the broad outline. We need to make sure our tactical position based on that strategy is fair to households so people can afford to make those changes.
Thank you. We've got time for a couple of more questions. So land use. How do we get the balance right between using land for growing crops and for restoring nature and energy production?
It is a very difficult balance to strike, because we know for farmers particularly solar is attractive because it's the remuneration you can get from a solar farm can be better than you can get from growing crops. So but I think it's very important we do maintain crop production, food production on our most productive land. best and most versatile land, as it's phrased. So there is at this point in time some solar going on that. I think we should minimise that wherever possible and try to focus our attentions on areas that will be real growth areas for renewables. Remember, our electricity is now 50% from renewable sources. There's been a 5-fold increase in the amount of offshore wind since 2010. We're promising another 3-fold increase, so a 15-fold increase it will be compared to 2010 levels by 2030. Some really ambitious objectives and targets there. Nuclear, there's got to be a spread. So I think solar ideally should go on rooftops, brownfield sites, stay away from productive land, and we're setting a food security target to make sure planning authorities do understand the need to produce food on that land as well as produce energy. But also making sure that we use all kinds of different renewable sources to make sure we meet our energy target obligations.
Thank you. We've got time for about 30 seconds left for closing message, if you have one.
Well, I know some people may think that there's been some watering down of our ambitions, but I don't believe that's the case. The guide I always go by in this is not by our government figures. People may be a little bit sceptical of those. I understand why. There's a Climate Change Performance Index, which is an independent body who looks at this, measures us against our counterparts from other countries. That puts us ahead of most developed countries, Germany, I think all G7 countries, US, of course, France and other countries. So we are doing some good stuff here. But do we need to do more? Yes, we do. And that's about leadership. It's also about a plan, a strategy. And I'm very keen to make sure we have a good plan, a good strategy, but we deliver upon it.